Well, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me as I walk through this case study on information security dashboards. Now, I understand there have been hundreds or more presentations at RSA and other conferences on security dashboards. And I want to be upfront and let you know that this is not a metric session. This is a real life example of how I built a dashboard and then it failed and how I recovered. And to tell the story, I turned to one of the most recognized slogans in advertising: when you care enough to send the very best. This was born on a 3x5-inch note card in 1944 by Ed Goodman. Ed was a sales and marketing executive at the Hallmark Company, and he just jotted down his thoughts on what Hallmark stood for: caring, quality, and the best. And now it's number 15 on the top 50 slogans of all time. And it's my standard disclaimer that this information does not necessarily reflect current or past employers. And lastly, I hope that you will learn that they didn't tell me, at least in college, that storytelling would be so important as a security leader. And so hopefully that's something you learn out of this as well. I'll also encourage you to type your questions into the chat window at any time, and I'll be happy to answer those. So when I started at this company, they had a good security foundation already in place. I was actually hired to reimagine the program and mature it. The company had just made a change to a pure SaaS model, and so that certainly impacted some of our policies and procedures and controls. So when I stepped in, I performed a NIST CSF self-assessment, which highlighted the areas of highest risk, and from this, I was able to create that multi-year roadmap. So similar to Hallmark, how do you build your security brand at your company? Building a roadmap with clear measurements from the self-assessment, that was pretty straightforward. However, how do we ensure the prioritization of the items in the roadmap, that's aligned with the goals of the leadership team? So this is how I approached this. First, I took an inventory of the policies, procedures, and tools that were already in place. Many of the tools, they were turned on and had one or two features running, but they needed a major health check. The SIM had to be totally rebuilt. The outsourced SOC was not being held accountable. The EDR tool was over 7 versions behind. The vulnerability scanner was there just to check the PCI box, and it wasn't performing authenticated scans. So it had many false positives. And this caused the infrastructure team to not trust the tool and thus not patch critical items such as Microsoft Office. And remember, these are all behind the scenes activities to build your brand and the maturity of the program without any additional funding. If you come to your first board presentation or major leadership presentation and you can show what you've already done without their knowledge or permission to improve the security of the enterprise and without additional funding, they're going to be much more apt to trust and to listen to you. So my next question is how do I show the value that the executives really care about, regardless of how relevant I think it may or may not be to actual cybersecurity? So for me, when I look at this, I tend to offer personalized security awareness training for different teams based on the risks, such as your HRIS team. Maybe if they've made direct deposit changes for the bad guys, you can target training to them. Or the finance team after they've paid out a business email compromise and didn't realize it. Again, this helps you gain that additional trust. Then taking the always fun cyber insurance calls with many underwriters and using your dark web monitoring company to search for personal information on each of the executives and their families. Again, you are building trust that money just can't buy, and you're not costing the business any additional funds. And how many of you are involved with your industry ISACs? These are invaluable if you are actively involved and actively sharing information. And I don't just mean sharing hashes from attacks, but information specific to tools that you are using, how they may or may not be working, web attacks that you're fighting. I mean, when I think of threat intel, I think of yet another feed into the SIM, which may or may not provide value to our organization. But for me, the real value of the ISAC is the sharing of specific tools and third parties and their vulnerabilities. So now that we have built the brand, how do we create this dashboard? I think the easiest way to build a dashboard is directly from your audits and framework. I mean, why reinvent the wheel? So for us, again, and many of you, if you and your teams and your enterprises are aligned with the NIST cybersecurity framework, you can look at each of those 5 pillars when you're building your dashboard. I mean, think about the identified pillar. Certainly you have some sort of change management meetings and you're tracking metrics from your change management meetings with approved and unapproved and emergency changes, or your vulnerability management program, right? Where you can show the number of, unpatched machines or, non-standard configurations. Moving on to the protect pillar, when you have your security awareness program or your patching program, you can show metrics from the success of each security awareness campaign that you're launching and track that on your dashboard, your patching metrics. And if you're doing, full disk encryption across the enterprise, those metrics. Moving on to the detect pillar, certainly you have an endpoint detection and response tool, a SIM. You should be, producing some sort of metrics from those. Again, only measure, what is valuable to you and the team. There's many things that reports that those tools have that are not valuable, that are more on the techie side. We're looking for more measurable, valuable metrics. If you have a SOC, whether it's insourced or outsourced, certainly they're providing you some sort of monthly reports on number of cases, the criticality of the cases, time to resolve. And so you can track those as well. And lastly, the recover pillar, your quarterly, your annual disaster recovery and business continuity testing to show the value of that, maybe your tabletop drills that you're doing, all monitoring that and putting those numbers onto your dashboard. So now you're ready for your first board presentation at the new company. Now, this is no matter what meeting you're in, but especially in a board meeting, they're very bright, very smart, very busy individuals. And like anything else, after 3 to 5 minutes, if you haven't captured their attention, they're going to revert to their phones. So what we need to do is when we come in, we need to ask for their help because as you and I all know, technology alone cannot and will not protect us from everything. So how do we keep it relevant and captivating? We need to ask them how they've been personally impacted by cyber security with identity theft and email scams and phishing and their kids. But remember also, our board members really are smart, but they probably don't understand our jargon. So again, making it personal is key. And one of the ways we can do that is by building common ground. This is something that I've used in many of my board presentations, and it really seems to get very positive feedback. And that is comparing cyber health to human health. I mean, they really are similar. Think about, why do computer systems get sick? We observe some of the same causes and stages of disease as we do in the human body. And attackers do go where security is the weakest. So if you think about bad genes that folks have, well, in the cyber world, we have software or configurations that could be, have unreliable or obsolete components. And these are some technical security vulnerabilities, that internal flaw that these software programs have. Or failure to practice basic hygiene. We talk about washing our hands and how that can help prevent infection. Similarly, we have, we allow our team members to go to unreliable or risky websites or use unapproved software products or components. And this can lead to infection or create a security hole. Think about unbalanced nutrition. I mean, the diet of our organization and its business processes. Think if you have disorder in your documentation, or you don't have a clear responsibility matrix. Maybe you don't have an inventory asset tracking system, or you don't really do change management. These leads to all sorts of losses and security incidents. But on the other hand, you can have excessive red tape, right? and bureaucracies and authorization levels that will inhibit the business. And so you have to have balance there, just like nutrition. Lastly, stress. I mean, our bodies certainly weaken due to stressful conditions. And if your staff are always overworked or overburdened with red tape, they're probably going to neglect your security procedures. And just like with a healthy lifestyle, the effects of these precautions, sometimes they can't be seen immediately, and therefore they often really go underestimated. The next question that I get very frequent is, what's the magic number of slides you put in your board presentations? And I hope you know there really truly is no right or wrong number of slides. You just need to use the least amount of slides that can convey the message accurately in a way that everyone in the room can understand. To do this, you really need to present to your CIO and CFO first. And this is regardless of reporting structures. Doesn't matter who you report to. You should, in my experience, and my recommendation is always to present to the CIO and the CFO first for their feedback. They are usually very, very valuable with their feedback. They've been in these presentations before, and they can give you some really great information and pointers. You need to keep your report and your dashboard simple and free from acronyms. Many of the board members, they understand accounting frameworks, even if they're not an accountant. They just, board members tend to really understand the numbers. And because they've come from other industries where they use that same accounting framework. And so we need to explain the what and why behind our framework and compare it to other frameworks, just like accounting, and tell them why it's important that we're following this framework. Lastly, our board members, they love having benchmark data and asking the question, why would we be doing something if our competitors aren't? And so again, this is where you can really heavily rely on your ISACs in trying to get that de-identified data of, how many of our peer organizations are also using the NIST cybersecurity framework. It's probably pretty high. And again, that's going to help you build that trust. You didn't go out and invent this framework. It's something that can come in and be independently audited, and that really will help you gain that trust. So when I presented first to our CFO, he told me, in line of the NIST cybersecurity framework, after I explained what that was and gave the background of the industry, he told me he really wanted us to focus on the protect aspect of the framework. And that was the exact feedback that I needed. He said, let's assume the bad guys are already inside. And so with those clear set of instructions, that it helped me group our initiatives into buckets with dollar amounts to show the true cost of our program and the cost over the next few years as we mature the program, going from maybe a 1 to a 3 or 4 on the NIST maturity scale. And since phishing was the number one and continues to be the number one way that ransomware is deployed, we had our marching orders. We said, let's go fish. But before we can go fishing, we need to focus on another P word. I mean, you can't go to a security presentation in the last 20 or 30 years without talking about patching. And typically patching is handled by the infrastructure team, but reported on by the security team. I mean, this is like the perfect tattletale situation, right? And as a result, most security and infrastructure teams just don't get along. I mean, just think about your brothers and sisters or even your kids. So here was the backstory. When I came in, again, a patching tool was in place and vulnerability scans were run, but they were inaccurate because they were running without authentication. And the real focus of those scans had always been to only scan and patch PCI assets that fall into the PCI scope. So I had to take a step back and how do I approach this delicately? I mean, the bad guys don't care if it's a PCI asset or not. It's all on the network. It's all network connected. How can I approach this so that the infrastructure and the security team actually get along and collaborate? And let me tell you, I didn't do it right the first time. So the way I like to solve these type of challenges is just like performing a root cause analysis when you have an incident, when you have an outage. And this is really how I try to attack these issues. Let's get in a room, let's take out the emotions and the finger pointing and just write down the facts. And so here's the facts to our situation. Too much effort was being placed on testing the patches. I don't know if you've experienced this. Some companies have an entire team that's all they do 5 days a week is test the patches of all their different systems ongoing. And as soon as they stop, it starts over for the next month. Is that really a good use of your team? The next fact was, well, things have changed since I came into the company. We have no custom or on-prem applications. We are fully cloud-based. So what are you testing? What is there really to test? What are you testing with the patches each month? So we decided that we are going to patch everything now, every month, but roll it out in groups. And maybe some of you are already doing this. Again, it's not rocket science, but it was a real light bulb moment for us. We're going to roll it out to a group of 10 and wait a few days, not a week, but a few days, roll it out to 20 or 30 more workstations, roll it out to 50. And after that, it's been 2 weeks. We're going to roll it out to the whole company. And now when we run those vulnerability scans each month after the patching has been done, we're going to give that report to the infrastructure team 1 week prior than publishing in our dashboard. That was something that I did not do right the first time. We never want to go into a meeting and be blindsided by something that's shared. And yet I did that without even realizing it, right? I was so excited to put up our first dashboard. They had never had a security dashboard. And I didn't think anything that it was going to hurt anyone out there. And I published this dashboard and the patching metrics were horrible. And the infrastructure team really felt thrown under the bus. So by giving it to them a week prior, we can weed out any false positives. And we can collaborate on maybe some of the stories of why some of the vulnerabilities are where they are in the report. And so it's more of collaboration, less name calling. So if you're not doing something like this, again, regardless of reporting structure, I would highly encourage it. So now that we can actually move on to phishing, again, at this company, we had a program in place, but it was being run infrequently, maybe only quarterly, and with very limited visibility in the results. They really weren't shared with anyone except the security team. And the same campaign was being run for the entire company. So the entire company would get the exact same email. And you can just lean over the cube, or I guess now virtually, right? Chat someone, hey, they're testing us today. Be sure you don't click on that. In addition, that email was so specifically crafted, it had to go through 10 levels of approval from HR to legal and all these different teams to make sure it didn't offend anyone before it was being sent out. Again, there's balance there, but the bad guys don't get those approvals. They just send it out. Again, no one, the results were not being shared outside of the security team. And there wasn't a wall of shame, which is a good thing. But there also weren't like recognition or prizes for the best catch for those that didn't click on it. So you kind of think of the positive reinforcement. There was really nothing. It was all really done in a vacuum, again, more as just a checkbox. So did we catch anything? To report on that, to put this in your dashboard, you really need to know your industry average, because that's the first question you're going to be asked when you report on this at any level is, what's normal? What's average? What's right? As security professionals, we all know that one is too many, but we have to be realistic and we have to set a target because we're all humans and it's going to happen. And so again, going back to your ISAC and checking with other peers in your industry, and there's a lot that goes into it because you can have an organization that may still be sending that same campaign out to the whole company. And so their numbers are going to look great because once the first few people get it, they do share with everyone else. And so to me, that's not an accurate metric. But again, you have to take all of those and average them to see what your industry average should be for click rate or respond rate or failure rate. So for us, it was 3%. We found out at the time in our industry of our peers, similar organizations, that about 3% of the team members were failing their regular phishing exercises. So we had a very clear, defined target, and we were ready to go fishing. So we published, talking about visibility and transparency, it's something that's huge for me, and it had never been done before. We published the monthly report to all directors and above. Again, this is for each department. They got to see the names of their team members and whether they passed or failed their phishing test for that month. Let me tell you, when you do something like that, you better get ready for the fallout and be ready to defend yourself. Our entire team would spend at least a week every time we sent the report out doing nothing but research. We would research logs from our web filters, the mobile device management system, our email gateway, EDR, all of our systems, because we constantly heard responses like, I didn't click on that and you can't even prove it. Or I was out of the office on that day. There's no way I clicked on that. Even better, we would hear that employee is on extended leave. Or the best response, that person doesn't even work here anymore. What these team members and directors didn't realize was that, according to our identity access management policy, when a team member exits the organization, while their email is disabled, it's forwarded to their direct manager. And so the manager would get the emails and click on the links. And of course, as you all know, the phishing programs still report that back as a failure for the intended recipient. Something else we learned is that employees do check their mail on their days off, even if they're hourly and they aren't supposed to, unless you have some way to prevent that with a mobile device management system or an identity access privilege system. So we published those reports, we've defended them, and we see the numbers continue to rise. And so with that, how did we convince our executive team to tie those phishing metrics, those dashboards, to bonuses? It was through some hard conversation, but in all seriousness, I had conversations with our leadership team and just really let them know that I don't need another dime for my security budget if we can't get our phishing numbers down. I mean, we are spending millions on technical controls, but our team members just keep clicking on anything we send. And this was really eye-opening to our CIO and the entire leadership team. They had never had someone seriously say that they didn't need any more budget and then follow that up with a suggestion to hit others where it impacts them most in their salaries. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand there's many different areas of risk to a company, and our team members are very busy, but they weren't motivated to slow down and read their emails carefully. And as we all know, money really does talk. And so we set this policy that for each director, they are now responsible for their teams. And any team with an average above a 3% failure rate in a 12-month calendar will have a reduced bonus. So we've rolled that out, and something changed. Now remember, the purpose of security awareness is not to shame, but to educate. And we were using a best of breed industry recognized solution, but our numbers just continue to drastically increase each month. And we thought, wow, we've done the training, we've tied it to bonus, and the numbers just continue to go up. Where is the breakdown? So we started sending test messages amongst just our team. We saw that a high number of the test messages were being blocked by O365. We also saw that no attempt at safe listing worked. The messages were being blocked. In addition, the messages showed being opened and clicked within seconds of being delivered. We thought, wow, we've got some great team members and all, but I think this is statistically impossible. So we set up multiple test scenarios to prove out that the sandboxing was the root of some of these issues. With that, we set up multiple calls with Microsoft, with our email security vendor, and our phishing test vendor. And after weeks of making changes and tests and calls, we decided, unfortunately, it was just time for a change. This really was hard. We really did like our phishing test vendor. They provided great reporting and great customer service. And me personally, I really like layers. I do not like to use the same vendor for multiple security services, but because of all of our research and testing, we had to make a change, and we had to really embrace the change. So we did, and the results are in. So with all of this said, we think, how in the world are we going to regain the trust of our leadership team? Because we've had to go back to them and tell them, hey, this solution that we're using through a long chain series of events is not accurate. The results we're seeing each month are not accurate for multiple reasons. And so we need to start over. So we did. We stopped all reporting for 2 months. We stopped all testing for 2 months of our team members. Instead, we internally tested and deployed a new system. And this time, the system that we used was with the same vendor that we currently used for our email security gateway. We had we couldn't get any false positives to fire off. Everything that we sent came through and showed accurately. Some that we clicked, some that we didn't. And so we thought, how will we start this? We want to start off on a positive foot for the entire company. And so why not take this new platform? Again, remember, our goal is education, not shaming. And so why don't we launch this new system and do the annual training with it first, instead of just straight to phishing testing? So again, not the hour-long PowerPoint that everyone clicks through while they're drinking their coffee, watching a TV show, but a 5 to 7 to 15 minute at the most, humorous, interactive video with a short quiz at the end. And so we launched that across the board. And after all, or at least a high majority of our team members had completed that training, we sent our first campaign and we crossed our fingers. And with a sigh of relief, we were back to normal. The test results were back to normal. Actually, they were much better. The first round failure rate was less. We had less than 1% of our team members fail the test. And we thought, well, this could be because of COVID, right? A lot of people are on edge. Maybe that, they're just being extra paranoid. But it gets even better. The new service that we used was a managed phishing test service. And so they could do all the research for us when we did have people complain back that if there was a false positive. And so with this, trust was reestablished. I mean, the executives would even call when they accidentally click on a test and let me know ahead of time. So how can you take all of this and apply it positively in your environment, in your day-to-day work? I would really encourage you, when you go back to your organization after this, that you would review the accuracy of the metrics in your dashboard. Maybe it's one of those things where, you've got all these different inputs from all these different teams, and, maybe you've got some great, BI system or something that's putting these together for you. I would really encourage you to review the accuracy. Do some very targeted testing, amongst a group, and test the clicks and the not clicks, or the failures and the passes, and see if your metrics that you're presenting really are accurate. I would also encourage you, and this unfortunately has to be done on at least a monthly basis, because as we know, as we embrace cloud and SaaS systems, those rules with our SaaS providers can change without us even knowing. And so I would encourage you to inspect those rules that you have in place, safe listing rules, blocking rules between your phishing vendor and your email security gateway on a regular basis. This should be, unfortunately, almost like patching, where something you have to inspect and check once a month. After you've done that, I would encourage you to set up a time where you can verify your brand among your C-suite. Do they truly understand the value that you're bringing to the organization? It can be through current or future, even non-project initiatives. So again, it's always great when security can come into something that's not a security-focused project and provide value, maybe through a single sign-on initiative or something that can save the business time or reduce some steps in a process and add security at the same time. And then within 6 months, you really should be updating your dashboard to reflect and align with your security framework. And whether that's the ISO framework, the PCI framework, HIPAA framework, HITRUST, NIST, you really need to make sure your security dashboard aligns with your security framework. And then always, always, always question the parameters around your security awareness program. Are you rewarding those members that are constantly passing, that are constantly reporting the phishes? Are you doing the best catch every week or every month where you're giving out a gift card or something? Or are you just putting up a wall of shame of those that fail? Again, I thank you so much for listening. I would encourage you to put questions in the chat window, and I'm happy to answer those for you. Again, hope you have a great conference. Thank you.